used to wearing one of these things. So, ladies and gentlemen of the IE Executive MBA class, it's truly an honor to be speaking to you today as your valedictorian. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to know any of you better during the school year because I was studying so hard. It was a tough competition, and I'm still not really sure whether I'm qualified. Frankly, there are many of you here that could be giving a speech to me instead. Most of you are actually doing something important in the world today, whereas my dubious line of business at present is angel investing. Angel investing means instead of being one of the athletes competing on the field, I'm more at the cross between a cheerleader and a referee. Anyway, here I am, and I was told I have 25 minutes to speak. I think 25 minutes is how long last year's keynote speaker took. And applying Moore's Law, it's my goal to finish in half the time as that guy and impart twice as much wisdom. Actually, I have 3 lessons to impart today, which I guess means that last year's guy probably imparted only 1.5 lessons. I have 3 lessons to impart, and I am anxious to see whether any of you are awake enough to spot them, because I'm going to weave them subtly into the fabric of personal stories and clever metaphors. So pay attention or you might miss something. So I've been told that this year's graduating class, you guys, your average age is 38 years old. God, I wish I was 38 again. I have so much wisdom and knowledge to share about what life holds in store for you. As I was preparing for this speech, I stopped to think about how different life was when I was your age. When I was 38, life was different in so many ways. We didn't have the iPhone 4S. We had the iPhone 4. When I was 38, the iPad wasn't out yet. And today, tablets are one of the fastest growing segments in personal computers. When I was 38, I would have had to write the speech myself, whereas today I just had an app on this thing write it for me. When I was 38, the iPhone looked like it was going to dominate the smartphone business forever, whereas today, the Android has already beat it in market share. When I was 38, Steve Jobs, Muammar Gaddafi, and Osama bin Laden were still alive, and Hosni Mubarak was still in power. The Arab Spring had not yet sprung, and people all assumed that today Egypt would still be controlled by a cruel military regime. When I was 38, the euro was on stable footing. When I was 38, it cost $48,000 to get your entire genome sequenced, whereas today it costs only $4,000. And in 2 more years, it'll be about $100. When I was 38, there had not yet been a synthetic human organ transplant made from the patient's own stem cells. When I was 38, scientists had not begun cloning a woolly mammoth from prehistoric DNA found in the ice. Today, I am 39. All of the changes I've mentioned happened between 2010 and today. Some of these changes, we must hope, are cyclical, whereas many of them are transformative and paradigm changing. But there's one thing that's for sure. We now live in a world of ever-present, accelerating change. So lesson number 1, change is the new paradigm. There is no longer a status quo. Change is happening faster than most of us can keep up. This is actually great news for you because you've spent the last year as students. The only way to survive, let alone get ahead in a world of continuous change, is to remain students for the rest of your life. What I mean is stay here at IE and keep paying tuition to the university. No, actually what I mean is be continuously learning, and more importantly, relearning, because whatever you learned yesterday may no longer be true tomorrow. You need to keep your mind open to new ideas, and you need to take risks. As Mark Zuckerberg said recently, the biggest risk today is not taking any risk. In a world that's changing really quickly, the only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks. So when you leave here, keep your mind open to new ideas and always question the status quo. If you follow the status quo, do it because you understand and respect the rationale for it. And watch out for when that rationale stops holding true, you want to be the first to ditch the status quo. You know who is always questioning the status quo? Children. This is why I believe that all children are born entrepreneurs. Not all of us remain entrepreneurs, but we were all born one. When we were children, we would always ask, why are things like this? And children aren't satisfied with the answer because that's how it's always been. Children want to know the underlying reason why things are the way they are. In this respect, my co-founder at my first startup was like a child. He always questioned the status quo. He wanted to do everything differently than it had ever been done. His name was Tony Hsieh. A few years later, we sold our company to Microsoft, and soon he was asking me to invest in his new company, Zappos. Now, this was around 2000, right in the middle of the dot-com bubble, where people were running companies like Pets.com and Drugs.com that were all going to go out of business. Zappos might have been like one of those, and it didn't even have a great domain name. And plus, who would ever buy shoes without trying them on? And this was before broadband, so just to look at a picture of a shoe, you had to wait several seconds. Zappos had a limited selection. They had lots of problems. Frankly, I did not completely believe in the idea of Zappos, but I believed 100% in the person, Tony Hsieh. Which brings me to lesson number 2. In a world of constant change, people are more important than companies or ideas. As students at one of the world's great universities, you have the rare privilege of being surrounded by other smart people, other people who value knowledge and learning. Don't take your current environment for granted. The diversity of students around you working together, everybody open to new ideas, eager to learn, willing to challenge their assumptions. Among the most important things each of you can gain from your time here is this network of people around you, people as intelligent as yourself. As you already know, people in the real world, in the rest of the world, are not all equally intelligent. The best way to ensure your own success is to surround yourself with people even smarter, more talented, and harder working than yourself, and hope that they'll do the same. Perhaps the single most important skill you can hone if you want to be successful is the ability to evaluate people accurately, and once you identify somebody as a superstar, stay close to them. When you have superstars, bet big on them, even if you don't always understand or agree with their ideas. Remember, the world is changing fast. The same idea that failed just last year might be a huge success next year. Speaking of bets, above all, bet big on yourself. For myself and for most people, the biggest mistakes of their career are not taking enough risks, especially on themselves. As Henry Ford said, whether you think you are going to fail or whether you think you'll succeed, you are correct. Now, most graduation speakers talk about taking risks, and they say, don't be afraid to fail. I'm going to say it a little bit differently. Don't be afraid to dream. And the test of that is whether your dreams are something that you're a little bit embarrassed or afraid to admit. If nobody laughs at your dreams or goals, then you haven't set them high enough. You need to make it a practice to set laughable goals. Now, for many of you, the biggest obstacle to getting there will be a fear that you might have carried since your childhood. The fear of humiliation, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of being judged and ridiculed. That is so stupid. Oh, sorry. To paraphrase something John Travolta once said, you have to remember that nobody else is paying as much attention to your failures as you are. You are the only one who's obsessed with the importance of your own life. To everyone else, your dreams or failures are just a blip on the radar screen. I've had plenty of failures, and I can tell you, looking back, most of them were not about bad ideas, but about bad people. Focusing on people has obviously been an important part of my work as an entrepreneur, building teams, building companies, and even more so as an angel investor. Looking back, my worst investments didn't fail because they were bad business ideas. In fact, some of them were excellent business ideas that might still make a great company today. They failed because the people weren't superstars. They didn't try hard enough, or they didn't stick to their principles, or they buckled under pressure. Meanwhile, some of my biggest successes, Zappos case in point, were cases where I invested in the person, even if I wasn't completely sure about the idea. So I started realizing maybe I'm just not very good at evaluating ideas. After all, when I hear a new business idea, what makes me any more qualified to judge it than someone off the street? I've got lots of experience, I've seen what's worked and what's failed before, but in a world of continuous change, how do I know which of those lessons are still true? I may not be very good at evaluating ideas, but I know that I'm pretty good at evaluating people. And as an investor, I've found that I'm more successful if I decide based on the people. Back in 2003, there were two entrepreneurs named Dan and Jay that I had invested in their first startup, a web company that had just been acquired. These two were just fantastic entrepreneurs, and I told them to tell me if they ever start anything new. Well, a few years later, Dan started a new company, But this one wasn't a web startup. It was a green energy company. And his idea was to reduce energy consumption by telling people how to save money on their electric bills. I had no experience or knowledge about energy. I had never invested in it before, and I didn't know anybody in the field. But I knew Dan, and I believed in Dan. So I wrote him a check before he even had a bank account to deposit the money in. The company that he started, O-Power, is now one of the most successful green energy companies in the world. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're on track to save more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire solar industry combined. The other guy, Jay, also started a new company. This one also wasn't a web startup. His idea was to start a bunch of schools, low-cost private schools for low-income families in Kenya. Now, I cared about education, but I knew there wasn't a lot of money in it, and I knew there wasn't a lot of money in Kenya. I didn't know anything about Kenya, frankly. But I knew Jay, and I believed in Jay, so I invested in his company. Today, just 3 years later, Bridge International Academies is worth tens of millions of dollars. They run almost 100 schools, making them the largest chain of schools on the African continent, and they're expanding internationally with the goal of educating 1 million children for less than $4 a month each. So you can see that my investing philosophy of betting on people has led me quite a bit afar from my original area of expertise, which is the internet. So remember what I said about what makes people important. It's because of the rate of change. In technology, change is happening at a breakneck pace. Something might be the world's greatest idea 1 year, and it's forgotten 2 or 3 years later. Think about how quickly MySpace appeared, out of nowhere, as one of the world's most popular websites, and how quickly it has since disappeared, all in just a few years. Not all industries change so quickly. Government and politics are historically rather slow to change. Likewise, food and agriculture. Nevertheless, food and agriculture are areas that I'm personally interested in, and I've been applying my philosophy of investing to people to these areas as well. I recently made 3 investments in food and agriculture. The first is Farmigo, which is actually a web company enabling people to buy food directly from farms. The second is Bright Farms, which is a greenhouse company building greenhouses on the roofs of supermarkets, enabling the grocery store to produce fruits and vegetables right upstairs at a fraction of the cost of transporting them from Mexico or California. And the third is Marin Sun Farms, which is a cattle ranch just north of San Francisco, California. So that's right, my last investment includes a company that literally is using my capital to buy cattle. Talk about moving from one of the fastest changing fields in the world to one of the slowest and oldest fields. It's no coincidence that the word capital sounds like cattle because they were once the same word. The field of agriculture is so old that it's why we use the word field to describe other fields. So why am I telling this story? Because there's a third lesson here. I can tell you something interesting about running a farm in California in 2011. If you want to run a successful farm in California in 2011, you need to understand technology. You need to have a website so that your customers can investigate your farming techniques and decide whether they like it. You need a mailing list to let people know what you're going to be offering at the farmer's market this weekend. You need a CSA or food subscription program so that people can buy food directly from you and eliminate the middleman. If the oldest, slowest moving profession in the world now requires a knowledge of technology, then every profession requires it. And that's my third lesson. Technology has become pervasive. You can't function, let alone succeed, in the world ahead of you without understanding and embracing it. Technology is the new paradigm, not just for the tech industry, but for all industries. You can't ignore technology and stay successful. Maybe you could have gotten away with that a few years ago, but no more. Warren Buffett has famously said that he avoids technology because he doesn't understand it. He prefers to invest in non-tech industries like chewing gum and razor blades. Well, I think that's a cop-out, and I think the days of that approach are numbered. Because technology is no longer just IT. It's not just about computers and computing. Technology now includes communication, distribution, brand identity, marketing, customer service. Can you be a successful CEO of a company and not personally understand what's going on with your brand identity, with your marketing, with your distribution, with your customer service? You can't. You can't be a successful executive without personally understanding technology. For those of you who already have technical backgrounds, this is great news because it means you have an edge over everybody else. And for those of you who don't, I also have great news. Technology is changing so fast that nobody keeps an edge for very long. You can start today and quickly be up to speed with today's technology without having to learn all the stuff that people like me spent the last 2 decades learning. There are websites like Code Academy now that can teach you how to program JavaScript, the web's most common programming language, in just 12 hours of easy online interactive tutorials. Now, it's always a bit scary to try to learn anything new, especially technology. But don't avoid something because it's scary. Remember, you can't be afraid to fail. You need to set audacious goals and take risks. Of course, the last thing you want to hear on your graduation day is advice on what to study next. But like I said, we live in a world where everything is changing faster than we can keep up, and the only way to stay relevant is to be constantly learning. And finally, remember that in a world of rapid change, the most important thing to help you succeed is to learn how to evaluate people. Try to find superstars, surround yourself with superstars, and bet big on them. And above all, always bet big on yourself. Class of 2011, go forth and spread beauty and light.